Hi there, and welcome to this week's edition of the Weekly Wrap. Simple news summaries brought to you by me, Verashni Pillay, and the rest of the Explain.co.za news team. It's been almost a year since South Africa went into a nationwide lockdown to slow the spread of the novel coronavirus, as it was referred to back then. Since then, we've seen a first and second wave come and go. In this edition, we bring you the latest COVID news because we know that it's taken a bit of a backseat with things like the Grammys and Duduzane Zuma's presidential ambitions stealing the headlines. We have that too, so keep reading. We also have the guide you need to understand the ongoing student protest. So let's dive into your weekly news update brought to you by Verashni Pillay and the Explain.co.za team. First up, where in the world are we with COVID-19? Let's start off with the latest numbers. South Africa is currently doing quite well, but scientists don't actually know why. As the Wall Street Journal points out, since mid-January, confirmed COVID-19 infections in South Africa have fallen from a record of nearly 22,000 a day to around just 1,000 a day, without any large-scale vaccination campaign or stringent lockdown. Plus, they say any scientist who claims they know why is a liar. Tell that to your opinionated family member at the next socially distanced family braai. There are, of course, some rumblings about herd immunity, but nothing is certain. South Africa's recovery rate is also pretty impressive at 95%. So how are we doing on the vaccine front? Well, we're 1 month into the vaccine rollout program, and so far, over 160,000 health workers have received the first jab of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. But authorities say that we are behind. One vaccination calculator predicts that it will take nearly 18 years to achieve herd immunity if the vaccination program moves at its current pace. Yikes. But things are expected to pick up with the arrival of more vaccines and the process getting faster. The plan is to finish phase 1 at the end of April with at least 1 million health workers inoculated. That would be most of South Africa's health workers. And if you're wondering when you will get your shot, according to the current strategy, you can find out using a particular vaccination calculator that was developed by a South African company called Omni. We've got a link for that in the podcast links below. Speaking of which, the South African variant, which was discovered in South Africa, can now be found in at least 48 other countries. So perhaps we should stop calling it the South African variant. The good news for South Africa is that the mutation offers us an advantage in developing a very effective vaccine. That's according to Alex Segal, a faculty member of the African Health Research Institute, who said that antibodies from the reaction to the variant can be used to develop a vaccine that can provide protection against other variants too. This is according to Bloomberg. He said, and I'm quoting, "It might leave the virus with not much room to go. This to us was incredible. Incredible indeed if you think about how mutations work and how scary it is with something like COVID, where it will just keep getting stronger and stronger." Lastly, on the third wave, fears of the third wave hitting South Africa is growing, especially as the winter months approach and people spend more time indoors. Plus, Easter festivities are coming up, so we may hear of super spreader events. So even though the infections are low, let's still mask up, sanitize, and stay safe. Moving on to our big story. There are many factors at play in the ongoing student protest, so we've decided to summarize the most important issues for you in today's edition. Firstly, what's happening? As you know, protests erupted at Wits University last week, then spread to other public universities after historically indebted students were not allowed to register. These students owe nearly 10 billion rand to the country's 26 public universities. Now, these universities simply can't simply just write off the debt. They would go bankrupt if they did so. Student leaders, however, have threatened a nationwide shutdown, but it's not clear if it actually happened. It was meant to have happened earlier this week. TUT, the Tshwane University of Technology, for one, noted its solidarity with the student protest, but opted out of actual protest to allow its students to focus on their exams. But what is the root problem here? Why are the students protesting? In a nutshell, it is fallout from COVID-19 plus poor financial planning and the inability by our authorities to make tough decisions. Think about it in terms of COVID. As more parents lost their jobs thanks to COVID, more school-leaving children then qualified for the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, otherwise known as NSFAS. At the same time, the body was given below-inflation increases in the most recent government budget on top of previous budget cuts. Together, this made for a perfect storm. So some background to these protests. Fierce student protests first broke out in 2015 and only sort of died away after then President Jacob Zuma delivered a poison chalice to his successor Cyril Ramaphosa by promising free education in 2017. But even before the pandemic, the country's national budget was not properly prioritized to make this happen. And afterwards, well, our national budget was completely reworked to cope with this once-in-a-generation crisis in the pandemic. Cabinet approved reductions of over 24 billion rand to higher education, including cutting NSFAS funding for loans and bursaries by over 6 billion rand. Given these cuts, it's surprising that the guys in government themselves are surprised by the current outcry and are only now scrambling for a solution. Lastly, can we even afford free education? Clearly not, for everyone at least, but we can make it available as promised for academically deserving students who just can't afford it. After all, youth unemployment among graduates is dramatically lower than among their non-degree holding peers. Only 1.8% of unemployed people were graduates, according to the latest labor force survey. So how would we pay for these deserving students? We could divert it away from hopeless SOEs like SAA. Government's latest bailout to our national airline is about equal to that 10 billion rand owed by students, coincidentally. Instead, authorities are now scrambling to plug the NSFAS's hole of more than 6 billion rand by taking money away from equally deserving sectors, but those that will make less noise. To quote Higher Education Minister Bladen Zamande, we're stealing from Peter to pay Paul. In this case, 3.3 billion rand of the 6.3 billion being diverted to NSFAS will be taken from the National Skills Fund. Now, this is an agency set up mainly to support and upskill youth who are not employed. If we don't make hard choices to prevent this from happening, we'll see these protests time and again. It's just not fair to students. Moving on to the briefs for this week. Zulu nation mourns its king. The Zulu monarchy has lost a leader with the death of King Goodwill Zwelithini, who was, with 5 decades on the throne, the longest-serving monarch of the AmaZulu. Reflections on his legacy were split, since some commentators decried his role in the violence that tore apart KwaZulu-Natal ahead of our democratic transition in 1994. Then there's the Ingonyama Trust he presided over as sole trustee. It was set up on the eve of the 1994 elections to help secure the king and the IFP's political participation. The party had threatened to boycott the process otherwise. The trust administers nearly a third of KZN's land and is accused of being unconstitutional and treating millions of rural people, particularly women, unfairly. 2 government panels have recommended it be dissolved. Unsurprisingly, the king fought against that. Nonetheless, many mourned at his funeral this week. It was a symbolic day. The rain poured over KwaZulu-Natal, as it did on the day he was crowned. As per tradition, the location of his remains will remain unknown by the public. It is not yet clear who his successor will be. Moving on to our former president's son, Duduzane Zuma has started his official campaign as future president. In a series of tweets last week, the Gupta favorite alluded to his political ambitions for the 2024 presidency. He's hoping to challenge Cyril Ramaphosa for the ANC's top spot. So who is going to break the news to Duduzane that the ANC is not a monarchy? Duduzane has no noteworthy political experience other than being the son of former President Jacob Zuma. Now, he's built a brand with his fans as a bit of a heartthrob, but he should note, thousands of Twitter likes don't magically turn into votes. Just ask Julius Malema, a far more popular youth figure and an experienced politician, who still captured only 6.35% of the vote with his party's first elections. No wonder former ANC Minister Derek Hanekom seemed highly unimpressed, referring to Duduzane as delusional. Although it's always great to dream, some thoughts should be kept to yourself. Moving on to the economy, in case you missed it, the economy's 2020 report card came out last week. That's the long-awaited GDP figures, which would tell us just how much the economy suffered thanks to the horror show that was 2020. Thanks, COVID. You've probably heard by now that the GDP contracted by 7% in 2020, which is way better than the double-digit shrinking everyone feared, thanks to a strong rebound at the end of the year. It's still tough though, but you know that already. So instead of telling you about that, here are 3 positive things about the South African economy right now, courtesy of Chief Economist at StanLib, Kevin Lings. Firstly, Our interest rates are pretty low thanks to the Reserve Bank's sensible move to reduce them, especially in the context of world and local economics. Since March 2020, the South African Reserve Bank has cut the repurchase rate to an all-time low of 3.5%. This in effect means that the interest rate on your credit card and your other loans are less, and the move also boosts domestic demand and spending. We have an explainer about that, also linked below if you'd like to know more about how things like interest rate cuts works. Secondly, tax revenue collection increased during 2020. We told you about this last week. Ling said that this was as a result of a strong rebound in corporate income tax from the mining sector, more job losses in low-income earning brackets, which contribute little to the economy, and because Treasury's predictions were conservative. All this means is that the government has more money to channel into important things like vaccines and hopefully education. An increase in foreign investment is the third final highlight. In November and December, foreigners bought South African government bonds for the first time since June, Ling said. This translates to a sustainable stream of money into the economy. Moving on to last weekend's news, women won big at the Grammys. The 63rd annual Grammy Awards ceremony on Sunday was a muted affair given COVID-19, but it still made history. Firstly, for us as South Africans, our favorite comedian and export, Trevor Noah, took center stage to host the prestigious event. Noah was his usual charming self, sporting a black tux and ever-growing afro, but played it safe as far as his jokes were concerned. And secondly, the 2021 Grammys belonged to women. First up, Beyoncé made history as the first woman to receive 28 Grammy Awards in her lifetime. This year's award was presented in honor of her single Black Parade, a celebration of black power and resilience, released on Juneteenth, the day commemorating the end of slavery in the US. Taylor Swift also made history as the first female artist to win Album of the Year 3 times in a row, this time with a stripped-down, rather indie album made during lockdown called Folklore. Other winners included H.E.R.'s I Can't Breathe, a tribute to the Black Lives Matter movement and to the death of George Floyd, for Song of the Year. But fans of Doja Cat, an artist of South African descent, are upset because she did not scoop any awards. Blue Ivy Carter, meanwhile, Beyoncé's 9-year-old daughter, also picked up her first ever Grammy Award for her role in the song Brown Skin Girl. Fix your crown, ladies, it's time to shine. Now, Raymond Ackerman, the iconic South African businessman who took over the Pick n Pay chain and made it what it is today, turned 90 last week. Ackerman's real business journey kicked off after he was fired from his position as MD of Checkers, as Business Live reports. It was in the 1960s, and with South Africa's political climate at the time, Ackerman considered emigrating and starting a business of his own somewhere else. But Ackerman, then a father of 3, decided to stay in South Africa. Years later, he says he has no regrets, and neither do we. In a heartwarming open letter, Ackerman commented on the resilience of South Africans and how we as a nation have been handling the pandemic. He said, "Yet we are still standing, and the way in which people have got on with life in the most trying circumstances and cared for one another along the way is a source of great hope for the future." He added that we must not lose hope and is positive that in the next 60 years, South Africa's businesses will be booming. If there was a tip we could share from the 90-year-old, it is, in short, doing good is good business. If we rebuild our economy on this basis, our future will be secure. We can't help but agree. In international news, Unilever has dropped the word normal from product packaging. It was always normal to see that word on cosmetic products. Think normal to combination skin or normal hair versus dry and frizzy hair and so on. But what does normal even mean? I'm not even sure after having said that word so many times. That's why Unilever, the owner of brands like Dove and Glow and Lovely in India, which was rebranded from Fair and Lovely for similar reasons, is dropping the word normal from its more than 100 brands. It says that this is to ensure there's a more inclusive definition of beauty, especially after it faced backlash for some of its adverts. Unilever announced that it will also stop photoshopping the body shape, size, proportion, and skin tones of models featured in its own advertisement, Al Jazeera reported. This is all quite huge, considering that brands have resisted this kind of inclusivity for years, instead favoring marketing campaigns aimed at creating body insecurity to flog their products. The world is changing. Finally, finishing feta. If you're a cheese lover, you're going to love this one. Take one huge block of feta cheese, some cherry tomatoes, garlic, salt, and spices, bake it in the oven, and then smash it up into a sauce. Throw it over some pasta, garnish with basil leaves, and enjoy. Make sure to record the entire thing or you know it never happened and upload it to TikTok. Then finally, watch it go viral until there's no feta cheese left on the shelves. Yes, we're serious. This actually happened in Finland. A TikTok account called Grilled Cheese Social popularized this recipe on the video sharing platform in January, prompting a national feta cheese shortage in the country. Should we blame the Finnish for finishing the feta? That's it from us at The Wrap, a product of Explain.coza. Simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love. Tell your friends to subscribe at www.explain.coza/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from us.